The alien woman feared her new human escort until he stepped into the bolt for her. Why did the alien woman fear the human assigned to escort her? And what could make him step into the bolt meant for her? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you enjoy emotional science fiction stories about humanity, trust, and unexpected connections among the stars, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Thank you for spending your time with us and for continuing to support the channel. Your support means more than you know. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? Now, settle in and stay with us, because we begin the story. Do not let the human touch me. Lyra Valen spoke quietly enough that she expected the words to remain between herself and her diplomatic aide, but the elevator doors opened before the aide could answer. Ethan Cole stood inside. For one uncomfortable second, nobody moved. He was taller than Lyra expected, broad through the shoulders beneath a plain dark security jacket, with short brown hair and gray-blue eyes that seemed to notice everything without staring at anything. Nothing about him resembled the ceremonial guards of her world. No polished armor, no jeweled insignia, no visible display of rank. Somehow, that made him more unsettling. Humans had a reputation for endurance, improvisation, and the deeply unreasonable habit of continuing after sensible species stopped. Lyra's sapphire-purple skin darkened slightly along her cheekbones. Ethan's gaze moved from her amber eyes to the aide beside her, then briefly toward the corridor behind them. Ambassador Valen? His voice was calm. American, according to the translation profile. Yes. Ethan Cole. Meridian Spire assigned me as your escort through tomorrow's diplomatic session. Lyra looked at her aide. This is the replacement. Ethan answered before the aide could. Apparently I am. There was no offense in his tone. That bothered her almost as much as his size. I requested station personnel. You received station personnel. You are human. Ethan glanced down at his badge as though checking. Still appears that way. Her aide made a small sound that might have been suppressed amusement. Lyra did not share it. She stepped into the elevator, leaving as much space between herself and Ethan as the cabin allowed. He noticed. Of course he noticed. The elevator was only about 9 feet wide, its mirrored walls reflecting Meridian Spire's cold silver light across his pale skin and her iridescent complexion. Ethan immediately moved to the opposite side. He placed both hands loosely in front of him where she could see them. He did not mention her earlier instruction. That was when Lyra realized he must have heard it. Heat rose beneath the skin along her throat. You understood what I said before the doors opened. Yes. And you have nothing to say? You do not know me. The elevator began descending, a faint vibration humming beneath their feet. Lyra studied him through the mirrored wall. Most guards would consider fear an insult. Most guards are not being paid to manage your opinion of them. What are you being paid to manage? Ethan's eyes moved toward the floor indicator, then the ceiling camera, then the emergency control panel. Getting you where you need to go with your choices intact. Lyra frowned. That is an unusual definition of protection. It is the one in my contract. The elevator doors opened onto Meridian Spire's diplomatic concourse. Beyond them stretched nearly half a mile of white alloy, glass, and artificial starlight. Delegates from dozens of worlds moved beneath suspended navigation symbols. Lyra stepped out. Ethan waited until she had cleared the doorway before following. She heard his boots behind her and instinctively tightened her shoulders. The footsteps stopped. Lyra turned. Ethan stood 6 feet away. Problem? She asked. No. Then why did you stop? You tense up when I get closer. She stared at him. No accusation. No wounded pride. Just observation. Ethan gestured toward the corridor. 6 feet work for you. Lyra hesitated, then nodded. For now. For now works. She resumed walking. 6 feet behind her, Ethan matched her pace without closing the distance. Lyra told herself that this should have made her feel safer. Instead, something stranger happened. For the first time since learning a human would be guarding her, she became curious about him. Lyra discovered within 3 minutes that 6 feet could feel more noticeable than 1. Ethan never drifted closer. He did not hurry her when the diplomatic concourse narrowed around a delegation of towering mineral-bodied envoys, and he never placed a guiding hand near her shoulder the way Valen security officers would have done automatically. He simply adjusted his path, always remaining behind and slightly to her right. The distance became a rhythm, her softer steps against the polished alloy, then his heavier boots following with patient precision. She could hear him without needing to look. Meridian Spire curved around them in layers of white metal and transparent glass, its enormous windows revealing a field of stars so sharp they looked carved into black stone. Cool recycled air carried faint traces of machine lubricant, roasted grain from a nearby human cafe, and the unfamiliar citrus scent of diplomatic sterilizer. Lyra's aide walked beside her, reviewing tomorrow's schedule. Reception at 1700 hours, preliminary council consultation at 1830, then transportation to the eastern residence. Transportation confirmed? Lyra asked. Twice. Ethan's voice came from behind them. Which platform? The aide looked back. Platform 12. Vehicle identification? Why? Lyra asked. Because confirmed transportation is more useful when we know what was confirmed. His tone remained mild. The aide opened her tablet. Diplomatic Shuttle 79. Platform 12. Thank you. Lyra glanced over her shoulder. Do humans question everything? Not everything. How comforting. We occasionally trust restaurant menus. She almost smiled and disliked that she almost smiled. They reached a broad intersection where streams of delegates crossed beneath floating navigation markers. Ethan slowed. Lyra felt it before she heard the change in his footsteps. She turned. He was looking into the reflection of a dark glass wall rather than directly at the crowd. What is it? Probably nothing. That phrase usually means something. His eyes shifted toward a security camera mounted above the intersection. Camera is pointed about 10 degrees too far left. Lyra followed his gaze. You can tell. There is a clean arc in the dust around the mounting bracket. It usually covers this corridor. Her aide frowned. Maintenance could have moved it. Could have. Ethan continued walking. He did not dramatize the observation or call security. That unsettled Lyra in a different way. Her people were trained to respond visibly to uncertainty. Ethan seemed comfortable storing unanswered questions in his head. A few minutes later, they approached another elevator. The doors opened onto an empty cabin. Lyra stopped. Ethan immediately understood. We can take the stairs. We are 32 levels above the residence concourse. That would make the stairs memorable. She looked at him. His expression remained completely serious except for the smallest warmth in his eyes. You are making a joke. A tempting one. Why? Because you are staring at that elevator like it personally offended you. Lyra exhaled slowly and stepped inside. Ethan entered last and took his familiar position beside the controls, leaving nearly the entire cabin between them. His hands remained visible. The doors closed. For several seconds, only the low electrical hum surrounded them. Lyra watched the floor numbers descend. Tell me something about Earth, she said suddenly. Ethan blinked. That is a large subject. Something ordinary. He considered it. Rain smells different depending on where it lands. Lyra turned toward him. Rain has a smell? On hot pavement, yes. On dry soil, definitely. Forests are different again. You notice such things? Humans notice things that are not useful. Why? Ethan looked toward the mirrored doors. Maybe curiosity was useful before we knew it was. The elevator slowed. Lyra realized her shoulders had relaxed. The doors opened, and Ethan waited for her to leave first. 6 feet behind her, his footsteps returned. This time, she did not tense when she heard them. Instead, she noticed something ahead that Ethan had not mentioned yet. A maintenance door beside their assigned corridor stood slightly open. The maintenance door was open less than 2 inches, but Ethan stopped as if someone had drawn a line across the corridor. Lyra took another step before realizing his footsteps were gone. She turned. He stood 6 feet behind her, gray-blue eyes fixed on the narrow black seam between the door and its frame. What now? She asked. Was that open when you arrived? Lyra looked at the door. A small green indicator above it showed normal access status. I have never used this corridor. Her aide checked the route map. It is a maintenance access point. Nothing unusual. Ethan walked closer, but not to Lyra. He approached the wall beside the door and studied the floor. The white alloy reflected the overhead lights like still water. Cleaning cycle passed through here recently, he said. How can you know that? Lyra asked. Floor is spotless except along the threshold. A thin gray line of dust remained where the door had interrupted the cleaning machine. Lyra stared at it. She would have walked past without noticing. Perhaps a technician entered afterward. Probably. You keep saying probably. Because probably is not the same as definitely. Her aide glanced at the time. Ambassador, the residence briefing begins in 12 minutes. Lyra nodded. Then we continue. Ethan did not move. The old discomfort returned instantly. Mr. Cole. Yes, Ambassador? I said we continue. I heard you. Then why are you standing there? Ethan looked from the maintenance door to the camera at the far end of the corridor. Because that camera is also turned away. Lyra followed his gaze. The lens faced toward the elevator they had just left instead of covering the passage ahead. 2 irregularities. Her irritation weakened. Could they be related? I do not know. That is not reassuring. Would you prefer a confident guess? She studied his expression. There was no challenge in it. He genuinely wanted her answer. No, neither would I. Ethan touched his communication badge. Station security. This is Escort Cole requesting verification on maintenance access, Delta 14, and corridor camera orientation. Static whispered for a second before a voice responded. Access Delta 14 is scheduled closed. Camera orientation should be central corridor coverage. Lyra's aide lowered her tablet. Ethan's face barely changed. Copy. Request alternate diplomatic route. Alternate route adds approximately 7 minutes. Ethan looked at Lyra. He did not tell her what to do. That surprised her more than the open door. Your briefing, he said. Your decision. Lyra looked down the bright corridor. Everything appeared peaceful. Soft ventilation. White walls. A distant window filled with stars. Nothing threatening. Yet she could no longer stop seeing the narrow darkness behind the maintenance door. Alternate route, she said. Understood. They turned back toward the elevator junction. Ethan resumed his position 6 feet behind her. Lyra walked more slowly now. You could have ordered me away from that door. I am your escort, not your owner. The sentence landed harder than he seemed to intend. Among Lyra's people, protection and authority were nearly inseparable. A guard recognized danger, then acted. The protected person was expected to cooperate. What if I had chosen to continue? She asked. I would have explained the risk. And if I still continued? Ethan was silent for a moment. Then I would stay with you and become extremely annoying about it. Lyra glanced back. That is your professional strategy? One of my strongest skills. This time she did smile. It lasted only a second, but Ethan noticed and politely pretended not to. They reached the alternate transit platform several minutes later. Lyra's aide checked their transportation schedule and suddenly stopped. Ambassador. Her voice had changed. What is it? Our shuttle has been moved. Ethan stepped closer to the display, still careful not to enter Lyra's space. Platform 12 had been replaced by Platform 19. Departure time unchanged. Who authorized it, he asked. The aide searched the record. Her face slowly lost color. There is no authorization. Lyra felt the cold, recycled air against her skin. Ethan looked toward Platform 19, where a diplomatic shuttle waited beneath perfectly ordinary white lights. Ambassador, he said quietly, I recommend we do not get on that shuttle. This time, Lyra did not ask why. The shuttle at Platform 19 looked exactly like something Lyra should trust. Its silver hull carried Meridian Spire diplomatic markings. The boarding lights glowed green, and her name appeared correctly on the passenger display. That perfection was what made Ethan suspicious. Your scheduled shuttle was 7-9, he said. Lyra's aide checked the screen again. This is 7-9. Ethan studied the vehicle through the glass barrier. Then why did it move? Perhaps station operations reassigned the platform. Lyra looked at him. Without recording authorization? That is the problem. A pleasant synthetic voice announced that Ambassador Valen's transport was ready for boarding. Ethan did not move. Travelers flowed around them, dragging luggage beneath the cold white lights. Somewhere beyond the platform wall, machinery hummed through the station's metal skeleton. Lyra felt suddenly exposed despite the crowd. What do you recommend? She asked. Ethan glanced toward her, and something subtle changed in his expression. She had asked instead of challenged him. We verify the shuttle independently. Her aide raised the tablet. The system already confirms it. The same system says nobody moved it. Ethan approached the boarding terminal and stopped before touching anything. Ambassador, permission to access your transport credentials? Lyra hesitated. You are asking permission now? They are yours. She handed him the tablet. His fingers never touched hers. Ethan compared the shuttle identification with the original reservation record, then opened the station registry. His jaw tightened slightly. Vehicle identification matches. Lyra exhaled. Then we have our answer. Not quite. He turned the display toward her. Original route lists the eastern residence. Current navigation request lists service transit ring 4. Her aide stared at the screen. That is not a diplomatic destination. No. Lyra looked through the barrier at the waiting shuttle. Nothing about it had changed. The green boarding lights still pulsed gently. The synthetic voice repeated her name. Yet the vehicle now seemed less like transportation and more like a question nobody wanted her to ask. Can the destination be an error? She said. Absolutely. Ethan handed back the tablet. But we have an open maintenance door, a misaligned camera, an undocumented platform change, and a destination nobody requested. For coincidences. I start getting unfriendly with coincidences around 3. Lyra's aide contacted station operations. The response arrived after 20 seconds. Transport 79 had officially remained assigned to Platform 12. No relocation existed in the operations ledger. Ethan looked toward Platform 19 again. We are not boarding. The firmness in his voice made Lyra's old instinct flare. You said the decision was mine. Ethan turned to her immediately. It is. You just said we are not boarding. Poor wording. He took a small step backward, restoring the distance between them. My recommendation is that we do not board. If you decide otherwise, I stay with you. Lyra watched him. He could have hidden behind procedure. He could have invoked security authority and removed the choice entirely. Instead, even while clearly believing the shuttle was unsafe, he handed the decision back. We do not board, she said. Ethan nodded once. Understood. The station reassigned them to a secure observation room while officials investigated. 10 minutes later, Lyra stood before a panoramic window overlooking the curve of Meridian Spire. Stars burned beyond the glass, and far below, transport lanes moved like threads of blue light. Ethan remained near the entrance. 6 feet away, as always. A service unit delivered hot drinks. Lyra selected a mineral infusion. Ethan chose coffee. He smelled it before drinking. You do that every time? She asked. Do what? Inspect things before trusting them. Coffee deserves respect. I meant everything else. Ethan looked into the dark liquid. Not everything. Then what do you trust? He considered the question longer than she expected. People who admit when they do not know something. Lyra turned toward the stars. I was afraid of you. I know. You do not seem offended. Fear is information. Sometimes accurate, sometimes not. She looked back at him. And trust. Ethan lifted the coffee, letting its warmth fog the edge of the cup. Trust is information you collect slowly. Lyra's amber eyes remained on him. Outside, a transport crossed the stars and vanished behind the station ring. Then perhaps, she said, I have started collecting. The observation room had been designed to make important people feel calm, which Ethan considered an ambitious use of architecture. Soft amber light ran along the curved walls. The temperature held at 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and the enormous window offered several thousand miles of stars, as though infinity itself had been included with the diplomatic package. Lyra stood near the glass with her mineral infusion warming both hands. Ethan remained by the entrance until she looked over her shoulder. You can stop guarding the door. I can guard it from over here. That was not what I meant. He studied her expression. The tension along her shoulders had eased. Where would you prefer me? Lyra glanced toward the empty chair across from her. There. Ethan crossed the room and sat, leaving the small table between them. It was the closest she had voluntarily allowed him since they met. Her aide had stepped into the adjoining communications chamber to speak with station operations, leaving them alone with the ventilation hum and distant vibration of passing transports. Your people protect differently, Lyra said. Ethan tasted his coffee. It had gone slightly bitter. Different from yours? A Valen protector does not ask where the protected person wishes to stand during uncertainty. They determine the safest position and move them there. Efficient. You disapprove. Not necessarily. Ethan set down the cup. Sometimes there is no time to discuss options. Yet you keep giving me options. Because we have time. Lyra's amber eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Even when you believe my choice may be wrong. Especially then. Why? Ethan looked through the window. Meridian Spire rotated slowly enough that the stars seemed motionless. Because keeping someone alive and controlling their life are not automatically the same job. Lyra said nothing. Her fingers tightened slightly around the warm cup. My previous escort would have boarded that shuttle if the station system confirmed it. Maybe he trusted the system. He trusted authority. Those are not always different. To my people, they nearly are. Ethan looked back at her. That sounds convenient for authority. A faint shimmer moved across her sapphire-purple cheeks. You say dangerous things very casually. Earth tradition. The corner of her mouth lifted. Before either could continue, Lyra's translator emitted a thin electronic chirp. She touched the silver device at her collar. Again, a distorted phrase spilled from it, turning her Valen words into meaningless English fragments. Ethan leaned forward, then stopped himself. May I? Lyra looked at his hand. For the first time, she did not immediately withdraw. You know how to repair diplomatic translators? No, that inspires confidence. I know how to reseat a loose connector. She hesitated, then nodded. Ethan rose and approached slowly. I am going to touch the outer housing only. You explain everything. You notice everything. That is your fault. He almost smiled. With 2 fingers, Ethan adjusted the translator casing near her collar, careful not to touch her skin. The device clicked softly. A green indicator returned. He stepped away immediately. Try it. Lyra spoke a short phrase. The translation came through perfectly. Functional. Technical masterpiece. You moved 1 piece of metal. Please preserve some mystery. She laughed, quiet but genuine. Then the door opened, and her aide entered carrying a tablet. Ambassador, station security has completed its preliminary review. Lyra's expression became formal again. And the shuttle relocation was not a malfunction. Ethan felt the room change despite the steady temperature. Someone entered a legitimate diplomatic routing request, the aide continued, using temporary credentials connected to tomorrow's council session. Lyra set down her cup. Whose credentials? The identity was masked through an administrative relay. Ethan stood. And service transit ring 4. The shuttle was instructed to wait there for additional routing. For how long? 27 minutes. Lyra looked at Ethan. Tomorrow's preliminary council consultation begins in 25. There it was. Not an obvious threat. Not destruction. Delay. Remove an ambassador from a room long enough for decisions to happen without her. Ethan felt the familiar metallic taste of suspicion at the back of his tongue. Someone does not need you harmed, he said. They need you absent. Lyra's amber eyes held his. Hours earlier, fear had made her keep 6 feet between them. Now she rose and walked directly to his side. Then tomorrow, she said quietly, we make certain I am present. By morning, Meridian Spire had replaced uncertainty with paperwork. Ethan trusted the uncertainty more. The official report described the shuttle incident as an unauthorized scheduling alteration under active investigation. Language so polished it nearly erased the fact that someone had deliberately tried to keep Lyra away from the council chamber. At 8:17, Ethan stood outside her residence suite while station traffic moved beyond the panoramic corridor windows. Artificial dawn washed the white alloy walls in pale gold. When the door opened, Lyra emerged in formal diplomatic clothing threaded with silver, her sapphire-purple skin catching the light like polished stone. She stopped when she saw him. You are early. 7 minutes. That is early. Humans have strong feelings about being late after somebody tries to rearrange the schedule. Her amber eyes warmed slightly. I expected you to say something reassuring. I can lie if that helps. Please do not. Good. I am not especially talented at it. Her aide joined them with the updated route. Station security had assigned 2 officers to accompany the delegation, but Ethan studied the map before moving. Same council chamber? Yes, the aide said. Different route. Every checkpoint has been manually verified. Ethan nodded. Who verified them? Lyra looked at him. You truly cannot stop. I slept for 4 hours. That helped. The answer earned the smallest smile. They entered the diplomatic concourse. This time, Ethan automatically settled 6 feet behind her. After 20 yards, Lyra stopped. He nearly stopped at the same instant. Something wrong, he asked. Yes. She pointed beside herself. Walk here. Ethan glanced at the 2 station officers. Beside you. Unless humans have changed the meaning of the word. He moved forward until they walked shoulder to shoulder with several feet between them. The difference felt larger than the distance suggested. Yesterday, she had monitored every movement he made. Now she seemed to listen for what he noticed. At the first checkpoint, Ethan paused beneath a security arch. Green indicators glowed along its frame. What do you see? Lyra asked. Nothing unusual. That sounded almost disappointing. Give the station time. They continued. A maintenance drone rolled past carrying replacement sensor panels. Ethan watched it disappear around the corner. Lyra noticed. What? Wrong department marking for this deck. Her aide checked the station directory. Engineering shares equipment during morning maintenance. Ethan nodded. Reasonable. Lyra tilted her head. You are capable of accepting explanations. Occasionally, at the next intersection, they found a temporary barrier redirecting foot traffic. One security officer immediately raised his tablet. Scheduled maintenance. Route remains approved. Ethan looked at Lyra instead of the officer. Your choice. She studied the barrier, then the alternate corridor beyond it. What would you choose? That is not the same question. I know. Ethan considered the route. I would continue, but I would verify the next checkpoint before entering it. Lyra nodded. Then we verify. They moved together. Halfway down the corridor, her translator chirped again. She touched it with visible irritation. Your masterpiece has failed. Ethan looked at the device. My reputation is ruined. Can you fix it? Probably. Permission? Lyra turned slightly toward him. Granted. He adjusted the outer housing exactly as before, careful and deliberate. This time she did not stiffen. Ethan stepped back once the green light returned. Better. Yes. She studied him for a moment. You always ask. When there is time. Even after I stopped being afraid of you. Ethan's hand paused near his side. Permission is not something you earn the right to stop asking for. Lyra became very still. Around them, Meridian Spire continued humming, indifferent to the conversation. Delegates passed beneath white lights. Air moved softly through hidden vents. My people would consider that inefficient, she said. Humans can be inefficient. You say that like you are proud of it. Sometimes inefficiency is where you keep the important things. Her gaze remained on him, thoughtful and unexpectedly gentle. Then the station officer announced that the final route had been verified. They resumed walking, but Lyra did not move ahead. She remained beside Ethan. Several minutes later, the council chamber appeared beyond a long glass corridor filled with starlight. Ethan felt something inside him tighten. Everything looked correct. Every indicator was green. Every officer had confirmed the route. Lyra noticed his expression. You still do not trust it. Ethan watched the reflections moving across the glass. I trust what we verified. And the rest. He looked at her. I stay curious. Lyra faced the corridor ahead. Then today, she said quietly, so will I. The glass corridor made Ethan feel as if Meridian Spire had placed them inside a telescope. Stars surrounded them on both sides, while beneath the transparent floor the station's inner ring curved away in bands of silver and blue. Lyra walked beside him now, close enough that he could hear the faint movement of her formal clothing over the steady hum of the environmental system. Two station officers followed several steps behind. Her aide remained near Lyra's other side, reviewing the council schedule. Everything was orderly. Ethan disliked how orderly it was. You are doing it again, Lyra said. Doing what? Looking at everything except where you are walking. I know where I am walking. That seems dangerously confident. Ethan glanced at her. You have been spending too much time around humans. Less than one day. Apparently we are contagious. The warmth in her amber eyes disappeared when they reached the final security checkpoint. A ceremonial arch stood before the council entrance, its polished frame illuminated by narrow green bands. Every delegate entering the chamber passed through it. Ethan stopped several feet away. Lyra stopped with him. Yesterday, she might have asked why he was delaying her. Now she simply followed his gaze. What do you see? The indicator sequence. What about it? Ethan watched another delegate pass through. Green light traveled from the bottom of the arch upward, paused, then disappeared. Probably nothing. Lyra gave him a patient look. I have learned what that means. One station officer approached. Escort Cole, this checkpoint was manually certified 40 minutes ago. I believe you. Then what is the concern? Ethan pointed toward the upper right corner. That indicator flickers after every scan. The officer watched the next delegate. A tiny green pulse appeared half a second late. Diagnostic synchronization, he said. Normal on ceremonial systems. Ethan nodded. Reasonable answer. He stored it anyway. They entered the council chamber without incident. The room was circular, nearly 200 feet across, with tiered diplomatic stations surrounding a suspended holographic map. Lyra's delegation occupied a position facing the central platform. Ethan remained behind the seating area while the session began. For the next hour, nothing happened except politics, which Ethan privately considered its own environmental hazard. Lyra spoke calmly about representation rights for frontier settlements, challenging a proposal that would transfer several independent trade corridors to centralized administration. Ethan understood only pieces of the legal argument, but he understood the room. Several delegates listened. Some avoided Lyra's eyes. One administrative representative repeatedly checked a private display whenever she spoke. Ethan remembered the unauthorized shuttle. Someone had wanted Lyra absent from this discussion. Now she was here, and whoever arranged yesterday's delay knew their first attempt had failed. During a recess, Lyra approached him carrying 2 cups. She handed him coffee. "You inspected the service unit before ordering that, did you not? I am wounded by the accusation." "Did you?" "Twice." Ethan smelled the coffee. Lyra watched him do it and smiled. "Hopeless. Alive." She stood beside him, overlooking the chamber. "The proposal is losing support." "Good news." "For my colonies, yes." "Then why do you look worried?" Lyra's fingers tightened around her cup. "Because the representatives supporting the proposal appear surprised." Ethan looked toward the delegates she meant. She was right. They were not frustrated. They were confused. "Like they expected you not to be here," he said. "Exactly." Ethan felt a small spark of approval. Yesterday, she had been afraid of his curiosity. Today she was using it. "You noticed that yourself. You have made suspicion contagious too." "Sorry. You are not." A station announcement ended the recess. Lyra started toward her seat, then stopped. "Ethan." "Yes." "If something happens, do not decide for me unless there is truly no time." He held her gaze. "Agreed." "And if there is no time?" Ethan considered the question. "Then I get you enough time to have choices again." Lyra nodded once and returned to her place. The session resumed. 20 minutes later, the proposal failed its preliminary vote. A soft wave of conversation moved through the chamber. Ethan watched the administrative representative stand abruptly and leave through a side entrance. His attention shifted toward the ceremonial security arch outside the chamber. Through the open doors, its green indicators had changed. One narrow band was now amber. Ethan set down his untouched coffee. Lyra noticed from across the room. Their eyes met. She did not look frightened. She looked curious. Then she quietly excused herself from the diplomatic station and walked toward him. Lyra reached Ethan before either station officer noticed the amber light. She stopped beside him rather than behind him, her attention fixed on the ceremonial arch beyond the chamber doors. "That was green before." "Yes." "What does amber mean?" "That is what I would like to know." Ethan contacted station security while the council continued behind them, voices blending into a low diplomatic murmur. The response came quickly. "Ceremonial checkpoint has entered secondary verification mode. No fault detected." Ethan looked at Lyra. "Reasonable explanation." "You do not believe it." "I believe someone should explain why secondary verification activated immediately after your vote." Lyra's aide joined them. "The next session begins in 23 minutes in the Eastern Conference Hall. Station operations recommends the direct corridor." Ethan glanced through the open doors. The security arch stood directly between them and that route. "Of course they do." Lyra folded her hands calmly. "What are our alternatives?" The officer checked his tablet. "Northern Passage adds 11 minutes. Service Passage adds 16. The direct corridor remains certified." Yesterday, Lyra might have heard only the word certified. Now her amber eyes moved from the officer's tablet to the arch, then toward the ceiling sensors. "Who activated secondary verification?" she asked. The officer searched. "Automatic system response." "Response to what?" A pause. "The record does not specify." Ethan felt a quiet satisfaction that had nothing to do with being right. She was asking the questions now. "Northern Passage," Lyra said. "Ambassador," her aide warned. 11 minutes leaves very little preparation time. "Then we prepare while walking." Ethan nodded. They left through a smaller side exit and entered a curved corridor overlooking Meridian Spire's inner docking ring. Blue engine lights drifted below like slow-moving stars. Lyra walked beside Ethan while her aide read briefing notes aloud. Halfway to the northern junction, Ethan noticed Lyra looking at him. "What?" Yesterday, I would have thought you were paranoid. Yesterday, you did think I was paranoid. I was attempting diplomacy. You were not especially convincing. A faint smile crossed her face. Your method is uncomfortable. Which method? Leaving decisions with me. Ethan looked ahead. Most people prefer that. Not when they have spent their lives being protected from uncertainty. Her voice became quieter. My guards were trained to remove uncertainty before I could experience it. Routes were chosen. Doors were opened. Risks were interpreted for me. Sounds efficient. It was. She paused. I am beginning to wonder what efficiency cost me. Ethan slowed slightly. Choice. Practice. That answer surprised him. Lyra continued before he could respond. If others always decide what is safe, eventually you become very skilled at obedience and very poor at judgment. Ethan looked at her. You figured out the amber indicator mattered. Because you taught me to ask why. I asked annoying questions near you. That is not teaching. Human modesty? Human avoidance of responsibility. She laughed softly. The sound followed them through the corridor. At the northern junction, a security terminal scanned their credentials. Green. Ethan watched the sequence twice. Normal. They continued toward the Eastern Conference Hall, arriving with 6 minutes remaining. Lyra's aide hurried inside to prepare her documents. The station officers checked the room. Ethan remained outside with Lyra beneath a wide observation window. A nearby star cast pale light across her silver-white hair. Ethan, she said, if you had been raised among my people, you would have been considered a terrible guard. That is encouraging. You question authority. Frequently. You refuse to make choices simply because you can. Usually. And you keep asking permission when nobody requires you to. Ethan leaned lightly against the wall. You keep noticing. Her expression softened. Because I understand it now. Understand what? You do not protect me by making my world smaller. The corridor seemed suddenly quieter. Ethan had no joke ready. Lyra looked toward the conference room doors. You keep it large enough that I can still choose where to stand. Before he could answer, her aide called from inside. The session was ready. Lyra stepped toward the entrance, then paused and looked back. Beside me, Mr. Cole. Ethan followed. As they crossed the threshold together, his wrist display vibrated. A station security notice appeared across the screen. The ceremonial arch they had avoided had registered a verification command specifically keyed to Lyra's diplomatic credentials. Ethan stopped reading after the final line. The command had not been automatic. Ethan waited until the conference room doors closed before showing Lyra the notice. She read it once, then again, her amber eyes slowing over the final line. Specifically keyed to me, your diplomatic credentials triggered the verification command. But I never entered the arch, which is probably why we are reading this instead of discovering what it was designed to do. Lyra looked toward the sealed doors behind them. Inside, delegates were taking their seats beneath soft white lights, preparing to discuss trade corridors as if the station had not just confirmed a second deliberate irregularity. Can security identify who issued the command? They are tracing it. How long? Their estimate says 20 minutes. Lyra gave him a look. Which means anywhere between 5 minutes and the heat death of the universe. Her mouth almost curved. Your species measures bureaucracy strangely. Experience improves accuracy. Her aide approached, concerned by their delay. Ethan explained only what they knew. No theories. No dramatic conclusions. The aide immediately suggested postponing the session. Lyra looked at Ethan. Your recommendation? He glanced around the conference room. 2 exits. One security officer inside, another outside. Transparent wall panels. Manual environmental controls. Nothing unusual. Continue the meeting while security investigates. You are already here, and this room has been checked. And if the person responsible expects me to leave, then staying becomes useful. Lyra nodded. We continue. For the next 30 minutes. Ethan remained near the wall while Lyra negotiated with 3 frontier representatives. He watched her confidence change. Yesterday, she had moved like someone accustomed to invisible hands arranging the world around her. Now she checked doors when entering rooms. She noticed unfamiliar personnel. She asked who had authorized schedule changes. Not fear. Awareness. Ethan found himself strangely proud of that distinction. His wrist display vibrated midway through the discussion. Security trace complete. He opened the report. The verification command had passed through an administrative relay associated with the same temporary credentials used to redirect yesterday's shuttle. "We have a pattern," he said when the meeting recessed. Lyra came immediately to his side. Ethan showed her the two records. Same relay family, different commands. So someone moved the shuttle and altered the checkpoint. Looks that way. Her aide studied the timestamps. Both happened shortly before Ambassador Valen was expected to attend a political session. Lyra's expression hardened. They are testing routes. Ethan nodded. Or testing responses. Meaning, yesterday they learned we would question transportation. Today they learned we would change corridors. Lyra became still. Then every time we avoid something, we teach them. Yes. That is unpleasant. Very. She walked toward the observation panel overlooking Meridian Spire's central ring. Hundreds of tiny vehicles moved beneath them. Tomorrow's ratification session cannot be delayed, she said. If I miss it, the preliminary vote becomes irrelevant. Ethan joined her, leaving enough space to avoid crowding her. She noticed the distance and stepped closer herself. There is another route, he asked. 1. The ceremonial passage from the residence sector directly into the ratification chamber. Security? Extensive. That stopped being reassuring yesterday. I know. The words carried no irritation now. She looked at him. What would a human do? Which human? You. Ethan considered the question. Stop reacting to the route they expect us to take. Meaning, we choose our own movement, verify every section ourselves, and make the final decision as late as possible. Lyra nodded slowly. Curiosity as security. Sounds better when you say it. Everything sounds better when I say it. Ethan looked at her. That might be the most diplomatic thing you have said. She smiled. The station officer entered before he could enjoy the victory. Ambassador, we have completed tomorrow's route review. The ceremonial passage has been manually inspected and certified safe. Ethan and Lyra exchanged a glance. Yesterday, those words would have ended the discussion. Now neither moved. Who performed the certification? Lyra asked. The officer named 3 security supervisors. Ethan checked their credentials. All legitimate. Any automated systems along the passage. Standard access scanners, environmental monitors, and ceremonial security emitters. Ethan's attention sharpened. Emitters? Non-lethal authorization devices. They temporarily disable unauthorized entrance. Lyra looked at him. Like a stun system? Essentially, the officer said. They are inactive for registered diplomatic credentials. Ethan looked down at the report in his hand, remembering the Arch command specifically keyed to Lyra. Unless someone changes what the system thinks is authorized. The officer did not answer. Lyra's gaze shifted toward Ethan. There was no fear in it now, only understanding. Tomorrow, she said quietly, we do not trust the green lights. Ethan nodded. Tomorrow we trust what we can verify. Lyra looked toward the stars beyond the window. And each other? Ethan hesitated only a moment. That too. The ceremonial passage was so perfectly prepared that Ethan distrusted it before taking the first step. Every wall panel gleamed beneath white station light. Every access indicator showed green. Every security officer carried verified credentials, and 3 independent diagnostics declared the route clear. Lyra stood beside him at the entrance, silver-white hair reflecting the pale glow while her amber eyes moved across the corridor with the same deliberate attention he had watched develop over the last 2 days. Everything says safe, she murmured. Everything said your shuttle belonged on platform 19. You are terrible at reassurance. I have other qualities. I am still identifying them. Ethan almost smiled. The ratification session began in 14 minutes. Behind them, Lyra's aide checked the schedule while 2 station officers maintained the perimeter. Ahead, the passage extended nearly 300 feet toward the council chamber, interrupted by 3 ceremonial checkpoints. Ethan had personally watched security inspect each one that morning. Nothing had failed. Nothing had been altered. That bothered him. What do you see? Lyra asked. Nothing. And that worries you. A little. She studied the first checkpoint. Then we go slowly. Ethan looked at her. Your decision? My decision. They entered together. The first scanner recognized Lyra immediately. Green light moved across the arch. Ethan watched the sequence finish normally. The second checkpoint performed a biometric confirmation and released them without delay. Still normal. By the time they approached the final section, the council chamber doors were visible ahead. Lyra released a quiet breath. Perhaps nothing happens. I would enjoy being wrong. Would you? Eventually. A maintenance technician stood near the final checkpoint, closing an access panel beneath a ceremonial security emitter. Ethan slowed. The technician displayed valid identification before anyone asked. Routine calibration, she said. Completed 3 minutes ago. Ethan checked the station record. The calibration existed. Authorized. Logged. Verified. Lyra watched him. Legitimate. Looks legitimate. They continued. 5 steps later, Ethan stopped again. What? Lyra asked. He looked back at the access panel. A small diagnostic light glowed green near its edge. Then amber. Then green again. That indicator. Lyra saw it too. The same sequence as yesterday? Similar. One security officer checked his tablet. Emitter reports normal operation. Ethan approached no closer. What exactly does that device do? Authorization control. If an unregistered individual crosses the marked threshold during restricted proceedings, the system releases a temporary disabling pulse. Range. Approximately 12 feet. Lyra looked toward the floor. A thin silver line marked the threshold between them and the council entrance. And my credentials? Verified. Ethan checked them himself. Lyra Valen. Diplomatic status active. Council access approved. Everything matched. We can take another route, he said. Her aide checked the time. 9 minutes remaining. The western corridor would require at least 17. Lyra remained quiet. Ethan knew what missing the session meant. So did everyone else. Could the emitter be disabled manually? She asked. The officer shook his head. Not without closing the ceremonial passage and triggering a security review. How long? Approximately 30 minutes. Lyra looked at Ethan. 2 days ago, she would have waited for him to decide. Now she asked a different question. What have we actually verified? Ethan considered it. Your credentials are active. The emitter diagnostics are normal. The maintenance order is legitimate. What have we not verified? He looked toward the green indicator. What authorization list the emitter received after calibration? Lyra immediately turned to the officer. Show us. The officer opened the local access registry. Hundreds of diplomatic identities appeared. Lyra's name was there. Authorized. Ethan felt the tension in his shoulders loosen slightly. There, Lyra said. Verified. Yes. She looked almost pleased. You taught me well. I deny responsibility. They resumed walking. Ethan remained beside her rather than behind. The silver threshold approached. 8 feet. 6. 4. The emitter stayed green. Then Lyra's translator gave a tiny electronic chirp. Ethan glanced toward it instinctively. At that exact moment, the emitter indicator flickered amber. Only once. Less than half a second. Nobody else reacted. Ethan stopped. Lyra stopped with him. You saw it, she whispered. Yes. The officer's tablet still displayed normal status. Ethan looked from the emitter to Lyra's credential, then back to the silver threshold. Everything said safe. Every official system agreed. Every record was correct. Yet the metallic taste of adrenaline had already reached the back of his tongue. Lyra did not ask whether she should continue. She simply stood beside him and waited. Ethan stared at the green light. Somewhere behind the wall, a relay clicked softly. His eyes narrowed. We are not crossing yet. Lyra nodded without hesitation. Then the council chamber announced 5 minutes until ratification, and for the first time, the green light above them began to pulse. The green pulse was too regular to be a malfunction. Ethan counted 3 flashes, each separated by exactly 1 second, while the station officer stared at a tablet that continued insisting everything was normal. For minutes remained before ratification. Lyra stood beside Ethan without moving toward the silver threshold. What does the pulse mean? She asked. I do not know. Good. Ethan glanced at her. Good. You once said you trust people who admit when they do not know something. Even now, she remembered. Ethan looked back at the emitter. Then I confidently have no idea. The officer opened a diagnostic panel. Local status remains green. Ambassador Valen is authorized. Check the emitter memory, not the station network, Ethan said. Why? Because somebody has been manipulating instructions between systems. I want to know what this machine believes right now. The officer hesitated, then connected directly to the checkpoint. A local registry appeared. Lyra's name was present. Diplomatic access approved. Ethan felt no relief. Timestamp, he said. The officer expanded the entry. Lyra leaned closer. That authorization is 7 minutes old. Correct, the officer said. Ethan pointed toward the previous entry. And that one. The officer's expression changed. The earlier record listed Lyra as restricted. Someone had changed her status shortly before their arrival, then restored it minutes later. They were testing whether the command reached the emitter, Ethan said. Lyra's aide looked toward the council chamber. 3 minutes. Lyra remained focused on the records. If my status is authorized now, can we cross? According to the system, the officer said yes. Ethan looked at the emitter. Green. Lyra looked at Ethan. According to you? He hated the question because he had no evidence left to justify stopping her. Every current reading was correct. The previous manipulation had been discovered. Security was watching the system directly. I think we can cross, he said. Lyra nodded. No fear. No hesitation. She stepped forward, and Ethan moved beside her. 10 feet from the threshold. 8. 6. The emitter remained green. Ethan heard the ventilation, the soft rhythm of their footsteps, the distant announcement from the council chamber. 2 minutes. 4 feet. Lyra crossed the silver line first. Nothing happened. Her shoulders loosened. Ethan followed. Then her translator chirped. The sound was tiny. Familiar. Wrong. Ethan saw the emitter change before the officer's tablet did. Green became amber. Amber became white. A narrow charging indicator raced upward along the frame. Ethan did not think. Thinking would have taken too long. He caught Lyra gently at the upper arm and moved her behind him as the emitter released a concentrated, disabling pulse. White light filled his vision. There was no pain, only a sudden sensation like every muscle in his body had forgotten its instructions at once. His knees weakened. The floor seemed to tilt beneath him. Somewhere far away, someone shouted his name. Ethan remained conscious long enough to realize Lyra was still standing. That mattered. He lowered himself against the wall rather than falling, breathing slowly while sensation returned in uneven waves. Lyra was beside him immediately. Ethan. Her voice sounded sharper than he had ever heard it. Look at me. He opened his eyes. Amber eyes stared back at him, wide with something beyond fear. Are you all right? She asked. Ethan tried to lift one hand. It moved approximately an inch. That depends on how generous we are with the phrase. Do not joke. That request may exceed your diplomatic authority. Her expression almost broke. The station officer scanned him. Pulse exposure only. No injury detected. Motor function should return gradually. Lyra released a breath, but she did not move away. Ethan looked past her toward the council chamber doors. How long? Her aide checked the time. 90 seconds. Ethan looked at Lyra. Go. She stared at him. No, your vote. You cannot stand. You can. Ethan. Someone has spent 2 days trying to keep you out of that room. He forced his fingers to move. Do not help them now. Lyra's face became very still. And leave you here? With 2 security officers and an embarrassing story. She looked toward the chamber, then back at him. The choice was hers. Ethan had promised that much. He would not take it away even now. Lyra slowly rose. You told me protection means preserving choices. I say a lot of things. Then this is mine. She turned toward the station officers. One stays with him. One comes with me. Preserve every local record from this emitter and disconnect it from remote administration. The officers obeyed. Lyra took 2 steps, then returned and crouched beside Ethan once more. You stepped in front of it. Ethan met her eyes. There was no time to ask permission. For a moment she could not answer. Then she placed one hand lightly over his, careful, almost tentative. Permission granted, she whispered. She stood and walked toward the council chamber. This time Ethan watched her go without following. The doors opened. Lyra crossed through them alone, shoulders straight, silver-white hair bright beneath the chamber lights. She had once feared the human walking 6 feet behind her. Now, as the doors began closing, she looked back at him with an expression Ethan understood perfectly. She was not afraid for herself anymore. The council door sealed behind Lyra with 9 seconds remaining before the ratification record opened. Ethan watched from the corridor floor as feeling returned slowly to his hands, first as warmth, then as pins of sensation beneath the skin. The security officer beside him kept repeating medical readings, but Ethan listened instead to the muffled chamber announcement beyond the doors. Ambassador Valen recognized. A pause followed. Then came Lyra's voice, calm and unmistakable. Present. Ethan closed his eyes for 1 second. That single word was enough. Inside the chamber, Lyra took her place while every display around the circular hall illuminated with voting credentials. She could still feel the memory of Ethan's hand guiding her behind him. The white flash, the impossible moment when the human who had spent days protecting her choices had made one choice for her because there had been no time for anything else. She looked across the chamber at the delegates who had expected hesitation. Instead, she requested the floor. Before ratification proceeds, I submit a formal security disclosure. The room quieted. Lyra transmitted the preserved local records from the ceremonial emitter. The data showed the temporary restriction placed on her credentials, the later restoration, and the final command that had activated after she crossed the threshold. More importantly, station security had traced the command while the emitter was isolated from remote administration. The origin appeared on the central display. An administrative relay belonging to the coalition sponsoring the disputed trade proposal. Silence spread through the chamber. No accusation was necessary. The records spoke with greater precision than anger ever could. The presiding delegate suspended the coalition's administrative access pending investigation and ordered all votes connected to the compromised system reviewed independently. Lyra did not smile. She simply cast her vote. The frontier settlements retained their representation rights by a decisive margin. Only after the result became permanent did she leave the chamber. Ethan had regained enough control to stand, though one hand remained braced against the wall. He saw her coming and straightened automatically. "How bad?" he asked. "For them." Lyra approached. "Very. For us." The ratification passed. Ethan exhaled. "Then I officially approve of politics for approximately 30 seconds. She stopped directly in front of him. No 6-foot distance remained. Security traced the command. To whom? The administrative coalition behind the proposal. Their access has been suspended. The investigation is expanding. Ethan nodded. Good. Lyra stared at him. That is all. What would you prefer? Perhaps some recognition that you were correct. I was hoping to have that engraved somewhere. Her expression tightened. Ethan. The humor left him. I am all right. You stepped between me and something you knew might disable you. I knew it would reach me first. That is not an explanation. Ethan looked toward the window at the end of the corridor. Stars burned beyond Meridian Spire, cold and distant. There was no calculation, Lyra. Exactly. Her voice softened. That is what I do not understand. Ethan met her amber eyes. You did not need to understand it. I do. She waited. Ethan searched for language that did not make the moment larger than it had felt. You were standing there. I had time to move. So I moved. Lyra became silent. Among her people, protection was duty defined by rank, contract, and authority. Sacrifice required calculation because value had to be measured before risk could be justified. Yet Ethan had measured nothing. Not her title, not the treaty, not what she could repay. He had simply seen another person in danger and moved. Humans do this? She asked. Sometimes. For strangers? Sometimes. For people who were afraid of them? Ethan gave her a tired smile. Fear does not make somebody less worth protecting. Something in Lyra's expression changed. Not gratitude alone. Recognition. She reached toward his hand, then stopped before touching it. Ethan noticed the hesitation. You can, he said quietly. Her fingers settled gently around his. Warm human skin against cool, sapphire-purple fingers. No ceremony. No contract. Permission? She asked. Granted. The word made her smile. Behind them, security teams moved through the corridor collecting evidence. Officials spoke urgently into communication devices. Entire systems of authority were beginning to answer for what had happened. Ethan barely noticed. Lyra looked down at their joined hands, then toward the stars. My people believed humans were reckless because you value emotion too highly. That sounds possible. I think we misunderstood. Ethan waited. You do not protect people because they are valuable, she said. You decide people are valuable, and then you protect them. Ethan had no clever answer for that. So he remained beside her in the quiet corridor, his hand still unsteady inside hers, while beyond the glass Meridian Spire turned slowly beneath a field of endless stars. 3 days later, Meridian Spire no longer treated Ethan Cole like hired furniture. Security officers nodded when he passed. Council staff remembered his name. One senior administrator even offered him permanent diplomatic employment, which Ethan declined before the man finished describing the benefits. Lyra heard about that refusal while preparing to leave the station. She found Ethan in the observation gallery where their strange partnership had first begun to change. Beyond the glass, her diplomatic transport waited among streams of blue navigation lights. "You rejected the council position," she said. Ethan looked up from his coffee. "News travels fast. It offered 4 times your current salary." 5. "That makes your decision worse." "Thank you." Lyra stopped beside him. "Why?" Ethan watched a cargo vessel drift across the stars. "I do not want to spend my life protecting institutions." "What do you want to protect?" "People, when they need it." The answer was simple enough to frustrate her. 3 days ago, she might have mistaken simplicity for ignorance. Now she understood that humans sometimes carried their deepest convictions without decorating them. "My transport leaves in 40 minutes, she said. "I know. Your contract ends when I board." "I know that too." A quiet vibration traveled through the observation deck as another vessel departed. Lyra rested both hands against the railing. "You have become irritatingly difficult to surprise." "Occupational problem. Then perhaps this will help." She handed him a small silver credential. Ethan examined it. The Valen symbol glowed above several lines of translated text. "Permanent diplomatic access?" "Not permanent. It says permanent. Your translator must be malfunctioning." Ethan looked at her. "You are becoming dangerously human. That accusation could create an interstellar incident." "Worth it." Her amber eyes brightened. "The credential allows you to enter Valen diplomatic territory without sponsorship." "Why would I need that?" Lyra turned toward the stars. "Because my government has requested a human security consultant." Ethan waited. "Specifically you?" "Specifically you." "That seems like a terrible institutional decision." "I recommended it." "That explains everything." She laughed softly. The sound no longer surprised him. What surprised him was how quickly he had learned to recognize it. "There is another reason," Lyra said. "I suspected there might be." She looked down at the silver credential. "My people will ask what happened here. They will want reports about the sabotage, the investigation, and the political consequences." "Reasonable. But I want them to understand something the reports will miss." Ethan waited. Lyra turned toward him. "When I arrived, I believed protection meant surrendering control to someone stronger. You showed me something else." "I mostly asked annoying questions." "Exactly. You gave choices back when fear wanted to take them away." Ethan lowered his coffee. "You did the choosing. Because you reminded me that I could." The words settled between them without ceremony. No grand declaration followed. Neither needed one. A boarding announcement sounded from the gallery speakers. Lyra's transport was ready. They walked together toward the departure corridor. Ethan instinctively slowed near the first security arch Lyra noticed and checked its indicator. Green. Then she looked at the local authorization panel herself. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. You look proud." "Must be the lighting." They continued. At the boarding gate, Lyra stopped. Once, she had insisted he remained 6 feet away. Now she stood close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "My people have a custom," she said. "When someone changes the direction of your life, you tell them before distance makes the words useless." Ethan looked at her. "That sounds suspiciously sensible. Do not ruin it." "Sorry." Lyra extended her hand. Ethan took it. Her fingers were cool against his, steady this time. "I was afraid of you," she said. "I remember. Then I trusted you. I noticed. Now I think I understand you." Ethan smiled faintly. "That might be premature. Perhaps. Humans remain confusing." The boarding light shifted to blue. Lyra released his hand, took 3 steps toward the transport, then turned. "Are you coming?" Ethan glanced at the credential she had given him. "You said my contract ended when you boarded." "It did." "Then what am I now?" Lyra considered him beneath the cold starlight. "Free to choose." Ethan looked past her toward the open transport, then toward Meridian Spire behind him. He slipped the silver credential into his jacket and walked forward. Lyra smiled and entered beside him. Outside, the stars remained enormous, ancient, and indifferent. Yet somewhere between one world and another, an alien woman who had once feared a human had learned that kindness could stand beside strength without becoming weakness. And a man who had never considered himself heroic had done nothing more remarkable than notice, ask, protect, and stay. The transport doors closed softly. No applause followed. No monument waited. Only 2 figures beneath quiet cabin lights, facing the same window as Meridian Spire fell away behind them. Ethan had not been born to conquer the stars. He had simply reminded one small corner of them what a human heart was for.